Buddy Valastro was 11 years old the first time he walked through the back door of Carlo's Bakery in Hoboken, New Jersey. He was excited. He had been looking forward to working alongside his father, the man who ran the place, the man he admired more than anyone. But what happened when he got there was not what he expected. His father handed him a mop and pointed him toward the bathroom. The owner's son was going to clean the toilets, just like everyone else. And that moment, as unglamorous as it sounds, turned out to be one of the most important lessons Buddy Valastro ever received. He recalled that morning decades later while speaking to a large audience at the Roots Tech conference in Salt Lake City, Utah. Roots Tech is one of the largest genealogy and family history events in the world, drawing tens of thousands of people each year to connect with their roots and share stories across generations. Valastro was there as a keynote speaker, and the crowd that gathered to hear him was not necessarily made up of bakers or food television fans. They were people interested in family, heritage, and the lessons passed down through the years. As it turned out, Buddy Valastro had plenty of all three to share. His father told him that day in the bakery that a person has to take the same pride in cleaning a toilet as in crafting a wedding cake. That philosophy, simple as it sounds, became the foundation of everything Valastro would later build. But why would a lesson about cleaning toilets shape the future of one of the most recognized names in American baking? The answer runs deeper than work ethic alone. Valastro grew up in a household where values were not just spoken but practiced. His father insisted on no television during family meals, a rule that Buddy carries forward with his own children today, extending it to cell phones as well. The dinner table was not a place to be distracted. It was where a family gathered, talked, and stayed connected to one another. It was also where some of his richest memories were made. The kitchen and the table were the center of his world growing up, and that centrality never left him. He has built his entire public identity around those spaces. He described his upbringing as genuinely blessed, not in a material sense, but in the sense of having a father who was present, engaged, and deliberate about what he taught his children. There was no preferential treatment simply because Buddy was the owner's son. If anything, his father held him to a higher standard because of it. The young Valastro learned early that position means nothing without the willingness to do the work nobody else wants to do. So when did Buddy Valastro actually begin to bake? The answer might surprise people who assume he was born behind a mixing bowl. He was a teenager before he started decorating cakes in any serious way. He had to earn that privilege. The years before, it was spent learning the full operation of a working bakery from the ground up. By the time he was handling fondant and piping frosting, he understood every other part of the business because he had worked through all of it. That progression mattered. It was not television that made Buddy Valastro a baker. He was already one, shaped by years of quiet instruction from a father who believed in building character before building anything else. Then came the event that threatened to stop everything. When Buddy was 17 years old, his father was diagnosed with cancer. He was 54 years old. The illness moved quickly. Within months, Buddy Valastro lost the man who had been his mentor, his employer, and the center of his family's life. He was barely out of high school, and suddenly he was responsible for keeping a century-old bakery alive. What do you do when the person who taught you everything is gone before you feel ready to stand on your own? For Valastro, the answer was to refuse to fail. He described a determination that settled into him in the months following his father's death. He did not have all the answers, and he knew it. But he committed to learning what he did not know from anyone who could teach him. He humbled himself. He listened. He asked questions. He sought out people with more experience and more knowledge, and he absorbed everything they were willing to share. That approach, combining the grit his father had instilled with a genuine willingness to be taught, became the engine of everything that followed. Carlo's bakery continued, and Valastro continued to grow. He was watching the industry, staying current, looking for what was coming next. When fondant began emerging as a material for cake decoration, he paid attention. He got his hands on some, taught himself how to work with it, and when he felt confident, he put a finished cake in the bakery window. What happened next was the kind of moment that changes a life, though at the time it probably seemed like a small stroke of luck. An editor from Modern Bride magazine happened to walk past the window. She stopped, looked at the cake, and reached out. The cake appeared in the magazine, fulfilling something Buddy and his father had once spoken about as a shared dream. That single placement led to more, and soon Carlo's Bakery was appearing in multiple publications. The exposure reached the Food Network, which invited Valastro to compete in its baking competitions. He competed. He lost. But something more valuable than a trophy came out of those appearances. A cameraman on the set pulled him aside and told him something worth listening to. He said that Valastro had something beyond baking skill. He had a story. He had a 100-year-old family bakery, a loud and loving Italian family, and a workplace where people were genuinely laughing every single day. That, the cameraman said, was a television show. Valastro pitched it. It was turned down. That rejection could have been the end of it, but it was not. He tried again, and this time TLC came to him. What followed is television history in its own modest way. Cake Boss debuted on TLC and became a genuine phenomenon. The show has since been broadcast in 220 countries and territories and has been dubbed into 45 languages. The man who once cleaned toilets as a punishment now runs a company with 18 bakeries, 2 restaurants, a production company, and 1,200 employees. He told the audience in Salt Lake City that he sometimes has to pinch himself, but he is careful to frame his success in terms that reflect where it came from. It is about hard work, he said. It is about believing in yourself and in the idea that in America, you can make something out of nothing if you are willing to put in the effort. That is not a new message, but coming from someone who lived it in full view, it carries a different weight. Where did the work ethic come from in the first place? To answer that, Valastro had to go back further than his own childhood, back to the generation that came before his father. His family story is a classic American immigration story, the kind that played out in millions of households across the country throughout the early 20th century. His great-grandfathers came from Italy. His grandfathers were born in the United States, but the families later returned to their home countries. When the time came to make the journey back to America, both sides of his family faced the kinds of hardships that are easy to romanticize from a distance but were genuinely difficult to live through. On his father's side, his grandfather had worked at a bakery in Sicily. He encouraged his son to learn the trade, and eventually brought him to Carlo's Bakery in Hoboken. When the original owner's son, a scientist with no interest in running a bakery, decided to shut the place down, Valastro's father stepped forward and bought it. That decision, made by a man who had emigrated from Sicily at the age of 13 and still carried memories of how hard life had been there, was the seed of everything that Buddy Valastro would one day inherit. His mother's family had an equally remarkable story. Her father arrived in the United States with nothing more than the name and address of a cousin he had never met. He found the cousin and asked for help. He went to work as a longshoreman, doing heavy physical labor to earn enough money to bring his family over from Italy. He could not read or write, which presented a daily challenge in navigating an unfamiliar city. His solution was practical and ingenious. Rather than spending money on bus fare he could not afford, he walked. And to learn his route, he marked the telephone poles along the way so he would know where to turn. How does a man who cannot read find his way through a foreign city and still manage to build a life there? Through a connection that came from the most unexpected place. Frustrated one day by how slowly he was saving money, he opened up to his barber. The barber was a Baptist, and he brought the situation before his congregation. The church members helped. When the family finally arrived from Italy, Valastro's grandfather attended the Baptist church in gratitude, while his grandmother continued attending Mass at the Catholic Church. 2 faiths, 2 traditions, living side by side in one household, all because a barber chose to listen and a congregation chose to act. Valastro shared that story not as a curiosity but as evidence of something he believes deeply. Our history and our roots, he said, make us who we are. That conviction was on full display during the Roots Tech event itself. Valastro served as a judge for a cake decorating competition held that morning, and he was genuinely impressed by what he saw. He said he was floored by the level of talent in the room, adding with a self-deprecating laugh that he felt he needed to raise his own game. He evaluated the work carefully, narrowing his selections by focusing on technical execution, then tasting for what he always looks for in any baked good: a moist sponge and well-developed flavor. 2 of the 4 competition categories came down to very close calls. The day also brought a reunion that went beyond competition and craft. Kimi Hansen, an 18-year-old with a severe form of epilepsy, was in the audience. 5 years earlier, in 2012, the Make-A-Wish Foundation had granted her wish to meet Buddy Valastro. That wish had clearly stayed with both of them. When they reconnected at the event, they talked about her baking, specifically her work with fondant, and Valastro offered her a few tips. Then he said something to her that summed up what the day, and arguably his entire story, had been about. He looked at her and said, "Remember what I told you, you can do anything." That connection between Valastro and Make-A-Wish runs deeper than a single reunion. Carlo's Bakery and the Make-A-Wish Foundation have maintained a long and active relationship. Since the first wish to bake a cake with Buddy was granted back in 2010, dozens of children from around the world have come through the bakery doors as part of their wishes. Valastro has served on the honorary board of Make-A-Wish New Jersey for years. The relationship is not a publicity arrangement. It reflects something genuine about how the Carlo's Bakery team understands its place in people's lives. That spirit was demonstrated again just a few months after the Salt Lake City event, in the summer of 2017, when Danny Dragone, one of the long-familiar faces on Cake Boss, announced a fundraising campaign on behalf of Make-A-Wish New Jersey. The campaign had a simple and attention-grabbing hook. Dragone, who had not shaved his mustache in more than 30 years, announced he would shave it off if the campaign raised $25,000 by August 9th of that year. The incentive: Buddy Valastro and fellow Carlo's Bakery veteran Ralph Atanasia would be the ones to actually do the shaving, on the balcony of the Make-A-Wish New Jersey wishing place in the state. Tom Wetherall, the president and CEO of Make-A-Wish New Jersey, noted with some humor that the organization had been around almost as long as Dana's mustache. He credited the entire Carlo's Bakery family as genuine partners in the work of granting wishes, acknowledging that their involvement goes well beyond appearances. Make-A-Wish New Jersey had granted more than 9,000 wishes since its founding in 1983, and the average cost of a single wish in the state runs about $10,000. The work is real, the need is ongoing, and the support of a visible partner like Carlo's Bakery carries real weight. Valastro himself responded to the campaign with characteristic directness and warmth. He said he was floored when he heard about the idea, noting that Dana's mustache had been around longer than Ralph had been alive, which made the gesture all the more remarkable. He expressed genuine enthusiasm for the cause and for the opportunity to do something meaningful while having a little fun in the process. Taken together, the events of that year painted a portrait of a man and a business that are genuinely rooted in something larger than commerce. Buddy Valastro built an empire. There is no question about that. 18 bakeries, international television, 1,200 employees, decades of public visibility. But the story he chose to tell when given an open platform was not about any of that. It was about a father who made his son clean toilets. About grandfathers who marked telephone poles to find their way home. About a barber who asked his congregation to help a stranger. About a young woman with epilepsy who was told she could do anything, and who believed it. That is the story Buddy Valastro keeps coming back to. And for an audience of people who have lived long enough to know the difference between a manufactured image and the real thing, it rings true.